On January the 29th, 2019, Chicago police was called to investigate a reported hate crime against an actor, Jussie Smollett. They'll find Jussie with a rope around his neck, reporting an attack where he was punched in the face and unknown chemical substance was poured on him. The two supposed perpetrators made a reference to Make America Great Again campaign during the attack. Over 3,000 police hours later, it was uncovered the whole attack was a hoax. The question we need to attempt to answer today is, how does somebody get to the point of staging a hate crime against themselves? If I were to outline 3 things that shaped who Jussie Smollett was at the time of the attack in 2019, it would be activism. He was extremely family-oriented, and also creativity. So all of the siblings at this point were raised in this orbit of Black Panthers, later giving voices to the Black Lives Matter movement. And their pathway went from child stars to successful adults in their own creative industries, and it was born from their family, the connection to them, their influence, and also the history of activism. What this means in the context of this story today is that usually when somebody is really passionate about something, it seeps from their personal life to their work life, and that is what's going to be the core of this story. In an interview that I'm going to play later on, Jussie would say he was sometimes maybe considered even too outspoken, and that whichever way you cut it, whichever way you see this story, will provide the potential motive. In California, on September the 22nd, 2007, Jussie was stopped by a police officer, and he was caught driving without a license. So when the police officer stopped him, then, asked him why doesn't he have license on him and asked him for his name, Jussie gave this police officer the name of his brother, Jake. The police officer stopped him because they suspected that he was driving under the influence, and Jussie would actually even sign a false name on the promise to this police officer that he is going to appear in court. So he signed his brother's name for the record. In January of 2019, Jussie would be living in Chicago while he was filming Empire. So this is where one of the locations would be. I don't think this was his permanent location. Again, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but he had a flat there. And here, on January the 22nd, he would report to the police that he received a threatening letter. It was sent to the Fox studios where Empire is filmed, and the letter contained threatening language. I'll put it on the screen because it contains the F slur, and also it seemed to be laced with a powdery substance. The investigators would later think that it was crushed up Tylenol, so it wasn't anything that would, react to the skin. But this letter, as you can see, it seems like somebody had cut out words and letters from newspapers. And then there is a little hangman figure and seemingly a gun pointed at the person that is hanging. The letter that you are seeing on screen that Jussie received on that day will either be a real threat by somebody who wants to do him harm. It might have been a trigger, again, a real letter that somebody had sent that had sent Jussie over the edge, or, as will later be suggested by the prosecution, it might have been staged, just like everything else in this story. But after the attack we are going to be talking about now, the police would get a search warrant to search the perpetrator's flat. And here is where the detective will find several stamps that appeared to match the style of the stamps that were used on that hate letter. They also found the TV show script. Their inventory would also log the magazines and the pieces of paper or writing. Here I introduce you to the Osundairo brothers, Abimbola, who was 28 at the time, and his older brother Olabinjo. At the time of the attack, both of them were aspiring actors. They graduated from Kinsey College in Southern Illinois and then have returned home in order to pursue different roles in the network series and films that were shot in Chicago. The brothers would also have a criminal record, so this would be a few years before they would meet Jussie on the Empire, as Jussie was playing the role on The Skinny, I believe, in 2012. Ola would plead guilty in 2012 to aggravated battery, so he was actually charged with attempted murder in a stabbing that occurred in 2011. And this stabbing happened less than a block from the home that the police would raid in Smollett's investigation. He would only get probation and have to pay about $670 fine. And his brother, Bon, had a DUI charge from 2015. Where the gap in this research lies, and I would love if somebody knew the information to fill me in on, is whether Jussie was aware of these charges. Because if he was, it just adds yet another layer of sinister to how this case was actually a lot more premeditated that a lot of people who just have read a single article on it online believe. The brothers dabbled in other businesses apart from acting on the side. They started a party and decoration business in 2015, and here they operated on the South Side buildings that was owned by their parents. This business, however, wasn't making much money, so at the time of the filing it went into administration, it was dissolved. Court records would show that they filed for bankruptcy in 2016 and that they were tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, and their store was operating at a loss. Things finally started looking up for them when in 2016 they were signed with the Model and Talent Agency, and this would bring them some minor acting roles on Chicago PD, on different indie movies, and finally on The Empire. So Bon met Jussie on the Empire set as he was working as an extra. And you can see how this would be beneficial for the brothers, who so far have been trying to make it in this career, to get introduced to the actual star of the show. Bon would say during the trial that it helped him because it allowed him to be around the acting scene and learn how they do things. This introduction in 2017 would lead Bon and Jussie to become mates. What we have so far based off of the narrative that Jussie would drive at trial is that the brothers knew him. There was definite connection that could not be denied. So a pattern had to be established where Jussie is spending time with both brothers, but really more Bon in his car, as Bon is just bringing him drugs and they're just smoking some weed, driving around in his Mercedes. Another piece of evidence that Jussie would know that the police would eventually uncover would have been the check for $3,500, so there was an explanation for that. It is for personal training purposes. And then, of course, the only way to explain how the items for the attack and possibly for the fake hoax letter as well were found in the Osundairos brothers' flat. The items that the police will know were used in the attack would be that the brothers attacked him on their own accord. Now, what would be the possible motivation for something like that? Blackmail. Because the brothers so desperately wanted to get paid more, to milk him for some more money. You know, this personal training thing wasn't enough, so they desperately wanted to be his security guards. They saw the opportunity with that hoax letter to extort the star of the show. That is why we have Jussie repeatedly saying that after he got that hoax letter, the brothers would pester him to hire them as security guards. He would actually say that the brothers would be stating that he should hire them for a security job that pays $5,000 a week. And then, when he was just saying, you know, I don't want to do that, well, the brothers wanted Jussie to be so scared that he would hire them as their guard. The plan would be finalized on the 27th, where Jussie would pick both brothers up again at their residence, and then there would be GPS records, CCTV footage of them driving around the area where the attack would take place on the 29th. As they were just driving on the New Street and North Water Street, Jussie would be pointing to the CCTV cameras and explained to the brothers that they believe that those cameras would capture that incident. Here is where they would agree that Jussie had to be beaten up, but not too badly, and that they would have to give him the chance, because again, this is all done for the cameras, for the CCTV footage, for Jussie to appear to be fighting back. In terms of items that they are to buy, Jussie would give them about $100 for them to buy rope, rather this would be clothesline that they will buy, then some sort of chemical substance, liquid. From some sources, I could see that first they thought gasoline, but then they decided on bleach. They were also to buy balaclavas, ski masks, whatever they find to conceal their faces. If possible, red MAGA hats, Make America Great Again hats, and like any clothing, anything else that they might need for that attack. Here is where Jussie would confirm the time with them, because as mentioned, the attack was supposed to happen on the 28th at 10 p.m. and he would tell them to leave their phones at home in order for obviously them not to be tracked later if anybody was to even look. It would also be during that conversation on the 27th, during the dry run, where Jussie will give them the check for $3,500 that would be made payable to BAMN. He then flies out to New York, leaving the brothers to buy supplies on the 28th. And according to the court records, we have the times when the brothers would go to the shop. We have the CCTV footage here where they're buying balaclavas, gloves. Even the shopkeeper would be interviewed later. And they said that the brothers would be remembered by them because they in particular sought out these items, as if not all of the shops sell them, and the brothers seem to just walk in and ask for like ski masks and MAGA hats. And then they would go across the street to do the laundry, out of which, according to the court records, one of them comes out, goes to another shop in order to buy the clothesline. Bank records would show that throughout that day, they would also deposit that check into both of their accounts. So they would split the amount and transfer $1,750 to each other's accounts. During the evening of the 28th, there would be multiple calls recorded between the brothers and Jussie, and it was said that the point of these calls was for Jussie to indicate that his flight is delayed. And then there was a call at around 1 a.m. on January the 29th where Jussie told them that he had landed, he's on the way to his flat, where they were supposed to move the attack now to around 2 a.m. At around 12:29 a.m., Ola calls Jussie, and this was about 19 minutes after Jussie's plane landed in Chicago, and only a few minutes before Ola ordered an Uber that was to then take them to that same block where crime would take place. The brothers would jump into this Uber that would take them to 14,000 block of North Wells, where they flagged down a cab that then took them within 3 blocks of the agreed upon location. They would arrive to that block at 1:22 a.m. And now, if they have left the phones behind, that would be why they have flagged that second vehicle, and also why they might be just walking the streets, trying to actually find Jussie, because now if they were to make a call, that would look again incriminating as hell, even if they had phones on him, but if they listened to him, they left those behind. While they're walking those streets, the video evidence would show that Jussie returned to his Streeterville apartment at around 1:30 a.m. At around 1:45, he left his building in order to walk to the nearby subway. He will say in the interview later that we are going to listen to that he was hungry. It was 2 in the morning. He went out to get eggs. The brother suggested a lot of protein, for him to lose his belly. So he was looking for Walmart, but Walmart ended up being closed, so he was looking to anything that is open, that is also providing some healthy diet, and Subway popped into his head. The next footage that we would have of the brothers would be at around 2:01 a.m. And this would be from what I believe is a department store. It's just footage of 2 figures running down the street. To put this into perspective, the brothers were dropped off at 1:22 a.m. They are just a couple of streets from the scene of the crime. They're walking in Chicago cold in January, probably concealing all of the items that they're to use, like a bottle of bleach that they will put in a hot sauce bottle, clothesline, ski masks, possibly MAGA hats. They don't have any phones on them, so they have to find and locate on the street the victim of their crime. Let's say the crime took at least a couple of minutes to take place, and then they're seen fleeing the scene after 2 a.m. Let's give it 30 minutes where they're trying to find Jussie on the streets. There were 30 minutes here where these brothers could have changed their mind. They have been waiting for at least 30 minutes to commit a fake hate crime. I cannot describe how heated this makes me feel, because both parties could have backed up, but this is my prime reason for not seeing these brothers as victims. I cannot see any party here as victims. You had in the cold for 30 minutes, you're walking by the street with the items that you have on you, and it just never crosses your mind, what the fuck am I doing? What am I doing? I'm walking with a bottle of bleach on me, with clothesline. How are we executing this, and why? Why don't you just go back? Nobody would have known. This wouldn't have probably been brought to anybody's attention. It's 2 a.m. at a random street in Chicago. Just go home. But no. So again, I pass the question on to you. Are they victims in all of this, when they had plenty of time to change their mind, plenty of days, and then even on the night of, plenty of time where they would have never even been caught? Because if you really think about it, the check was already cashed out. They already split the money. So yes, maybe they felt indebted to Jussie to go through with this attack, but technically, what was he going to say? If they just never appeared on the scene, just went to Nigeria, said goodbye to Jussie forever, he would have had to bring this up. And then they would have the whole diet plan, the whole meal plan there to back it up. Be like, well, he paid us for this, clearly. Like, had they not appeared, he would have had to bring this up, and then they would have had the upper hand of saying, oh, actually, he wanted to stage a fake hate crime. And again, it would be one word against the others, but they could have gotten away with that money. That's what I'm saying. Like, this didn't have to happen in any way, shape, or form. They could have just backed out, picked his money for nothing, for a diet plan, for a workout video, which is what they were saying this was. After the attack, there would be CCTV footage of the brothers running away from the location. They would have then flagged another cab, and then they were dropped off near their home at around 2:25 a.m. Now let us break this down, because this is the most well-documented walk in the history of this channel. There are court documents, there's CCTV footage, there is camera footage from inside of the cab, there are maps outlining the exact spots of this location. There was an eyewitness who saw Jussie because he came in front of her vehicle, because as you can see from this footage, he's making sure that he's visible, walking in the middle of the road. Here you can see the brothers' pathway of the night, where they have been picked up, where they were off camera, then the drop-off point, the points where they're marked as loitering, basically where they were just smoking. So they walked south to the river, then turned back, walked west and stopped just north of where the attack took place. You can also see Jussie's movements. You can see the pathway that he would have followed in order to go to Subway. He would indeed make it there and buy a sandwich, and then he would walk to the location that he had agreed upon where they were to attack him. Jussie would give a statement to the police officers and then would testify in court how he returned from New York that evening, how he was hungry and just decided to go out to get something to eat. He found out that Subway is open, so he went in, bought a sandwich. And then, on the way back at around 2 a.m., he heard somebody shout out racial and homophobic slurs. Then, these unknown offenders approached him. He thought he landed a few punches. He remembers that one person was in particular the perpetrator, and the other one seemed to be just hitting him in the back. He felt somebody was pulling at his neck, that there was liquid that was poured over him, and that he smelled bleach. And he would admit in court that he later reported that the attackers might have been white, because he could only see the area that wasn't protected by the ski masks, so their eye area, but he also thought that because of the racial slurs that they were using, and because they shouted, "This is MAGA country, Make America Great Again country," referring to the campaign slogan of the president at the time. He'd say that he slipped and he tussled with at least one of the attackers on the ground for up to 30 seconds. He said he only saw the second person, who he believes was the one kicking him on the side, as that person ran away. If we were to break down the attack according to what the brothers will tell the police and the court later on, as Jussie was crossing the street at the already pre-planned location, they shouted the planned lines. "Are you that Empire F slur?" and also Empire N slur. And then Jussie returned with a line of "What did you say?" At which point he was punched by one of the brothers. They made sure that if there is any CCTV recording of this attack, which from all of my sources there actually isn't, even though he did think that a camera would catch this, that he was on the ground, that they are bruising him, but not hurting him too badly. What this would entail was that Jussie would be on the ground and the brothers would be rubbing their knuckles into his face, trying to create those bruises. And then one of them would use that clothesline in order to create some rope burns around his neck. They also had that bleach inside of a hot sauce bottle that they just poured around him, but also trying not to damage his skin. And then they heard a car pass them by and realized, okay, this is enough, we might actually get caught, and this is why they started running down the street in order to catch a cab. They would also testify that all of the clothes that they wore during the attack, they would leave in Nigeria because they would fly there the next day. That bottle of El Yucateco hot sauce would be left behind. And here, after the attack, we know that Jussie got back on his feet. He still had his Subway sandwich next to him, so he picked that up. He left that noose, the clothesline, the rope, around his neck and just got up and left for his Streeterville flat. According to Jussie's testimony, he was actually on a phone call during that attack. So, as he was getting up, picking up the sandwich, he just responded to the person that he believed was still on the other end of that line, saying that he just got jumped. He notices that the noose is still around his neck, but he decides not to take it off, not to remove it, rather to just continue walking to his flat. Is this next thing going to be a sideline? Yes. Do I think it is important in this context? Also, yes. I have researched, as I mentioned, acid attacks on my other channel, on the podcast channel. I know that this is bleach. I know that this isn't acid. However, if a victim of a hate crime, especially conducted with a chemical substance, those crimes happen in a completely different kind of way. And that is something that is why this story is just so horrifying to me. Why did they have to use bleach? Why did bleach have to be the part of it? Because usually acid attacks happen in very rapid sequence. It is usually the sole goal of the attack, and that is because of how damaging they are. So usually the perpetrators would be again on some random streets where they're going to make sure that either CCTV cameras aren't operational or that they are covered and protected, can't be identified, and it's just a matter of splashing the chemical substance usually onto somebody's face, and also making sure that the victim is as far from their house, as far from the reach of clear water, which is the only thing that actually helps with the damage that is inflicted by some sort of chemical substance like acid. I again urge you to listen to any actual victim of an acid attack. Listen to Katie Piper's interviews, just for comparison of what Jussie will be saying to how any other victim of this attack would actually suffer, and also how they would portray the whole attack. Because the focus of these attacks is to do the most damage to you, whether it is to your face, which is in most of the cases, or to different parts of your body, and for you to not be able to get medical attention in time, usually these attacks don't entail anything else because there's already enough damage done. So usually the perpetrators wouldn't start off by knocking you down, tussling with you on the ground, everything that Jussie would say here, using clothesline that, as you will see from the pictures in this video, wouldn't even be untangled completely, and then using that to give you rope burns, and then at the top of it all, at the end of the attack, just pour a bit of bleach. There will be some bleach still left in that hot sauce bottle. And if they were to use the chemical substance, it wouldn't be bleach, because, as you know, if you have ever cleaned any part of your house, bleach isn't as toxic to your skin. If you are close to your flat, which Jussie would have been here, even if anything was to have gotten on his skin, he could have just rinsed that off. So yes, had it gone through his skin, it would have probably led to different burns. Had it gotten into the tissue in his eye, he would have had to clear that out to immediately seek hospital treatment. But by all accounts, the bleach would have never even touched parts of Jussie's face. So to those of you who are still skeptical about this whole attack being a hoax, I would very much like to know, how do you explain this? How do you explain that bleach was used, that it was poured into a hot sauce bottle, and then this is how it was applied, without leaving any lasting damage at all? Before we continue here and speak about the aftermath of the attack, let us pause here, because I thought it'd be interesting to just write up a list of the amount of times these two parties, the brothers and then Jussie, could have stopped themselves, that they could have backed out. Because here, I think more than in any other story, really, of hoax, of different frauds, of like any staged attacks, it was never too late. Even at the moment where we are at now in this story, with Jussie getting up with the rope around his neck, with that bleach left on the ground, walking to his flat, he still didn't have to report it. He could have just taken that rope off his head, realizing how ridiculous this whole thing is, and just like calling it off. Just next day, you know, when he meets up with the brothers saying, you know what, this was dumb, like, why did I do this? I'm not gonna report, like, this was insane. You keep your money, like, let's just move on. Nobody will ever catch this. Like, it happened at 2 a.m. at a random intersection in Chicago. Like, let's just cut this off. You go to Nigeria, I'm gonna go my own way. Like, this was insane. But he didn't. You let me know if I missed out on anything. Arranging the whole thing, the amount of texts and calls in between them, the delayed flight, just the wait at the airport. You're still thinking this is a great idea, we should proceed. The meetups on the 25th and 27th, the whole trial run, him spotting the cameras, searching for the CCTV footage that would possibly record this kind of attack, check, and the payments. He could have backed out, and he could have even still had that check on the record. As I mentioned, it's his word against theirs. If nothing happens, if there's nothing on the police record, people usually don't care, like just keep the money and go. Even during the attack, he could have just never reported it. No one would have ever known, no one would have ever picked up on it. Even at the point when he had now gotten up, gone to the flat with the rope still around his neck, going into the elevator, or just in his flat, looking himself in the mirror, not thinking, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I still going ahead with this? And the last thing that I have on the list is exactly where we are at. He would go to his apartment complex, take the elevator, look at himself with a noose around his neck inside of this elevator, and then probably have mirrors also inside of his flat, and he still would proceed. He would actually say that he reported this attack only because a manager who was at his flat at this time urged him to do so. Because of course he saw you enter the flat with a noose around your neck. Of course he's going to urge you to then report it. So Jussie returns back with his Subway sandwich, and this manager who was at his flat at the time asks him, of course, call the police straight away, we are reporting this. To which Jussie would give the reasons later as to why he didn't want to listen to him and report it. He would say, I'm a black man in America, I do not trust the police. I'm also a well-known figure at the time, and I was an openly gay man. But his manager does call the police. You will see this footage where they're going into the elevator, there is the body cam on them. The manager tells them that he is a star on Empire, and then they go into the flat where Jussie is still just waiting with a rope around his neck. The police officer asks him, do you want to take it off? And Jussie responds, yes, I just wanted you to see it.
He is like a star. He works on the show Empire.
Police body camera video shows the moment officers first arrived at Jussie Smollett's apartment after the actor claimed he'd been attacked. Smollett still has what appears to be a noose around his neck.
Do you want to take it off or anything? Yeah, I do. I just want to see it.
Smollett told police he was assaulted by two masked men, yelling racist and homophobic slurs.
There's a bleach on me. Bleach on me.
Either I have played that video now, or if copyrighted, I will put it in the description box. I do urge you to see it because it is so ludicrous and it will be heavily, heavily judged by the jury in the court of law, and also by the prosecution, who will drive the narrative in court that maybe Jussie actually had it still around his neck because he tampered with it. Because even the pictures that we have of this clothesline, as I mentioned, it looks like it hasn't been untangled completely. So you again have to think about, how much damage they could have done to his neck in what was maybe 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes. So what if he had then on the way home, or once he was in the flat, done something for those bruises to appear to be worse than they are? The jury in court would be shown the frames that would compare the rope around his neck just after the attack, and also the way that rope looked when the police arrived later. So this was done by the prosecution in order to prove that he might have actually tampered with the rope. One of the brothers, Ola, would also testify that he couldn't manage to get the rope around Jussie's neck. So the prosecutor would allege that Jussie was the one who had put the rope around his own neck and then inflicted those injuries on himself. Which I don't think it could have ever been proven completely, because it's again not caught on the CCTV. But if that is true, that is just another level of insanity that I cannot even try to explain. And here is also the only time we have some insight from a juror, because I found this article where the only black juror was interviewed after, and he just said that this was what kind of got to him. After seeing that footage from the body cam with the police, that he just couldn't justify why somebody, especially a man of color, would not have removed the rope off of his neck straight away. He said, as an African American person, I'm not putting that noose back on at all. That evening, so at around 2:27, the police would be called. They would arrive just after 2:40, and later that night, Jussie would be driven to the hospital. So I don't think the ambulance was called. I think the manager or somebody actually drove him, and here is where he would have the bruising and the swelling looked at. Here is where also he would make the first testimony that would result in one of the charges later, because the police would say it was false, and that was that at least one of the attackers was white, based off of the eye area that he could see. I will put here on the screen what I found from the court documents to be his first statement with the police. So he mentioned the attackers were pale. He assumed that they were white because of the racial slurs that they were making against him. And here, in describing to the police officer how this happened, he said he was wearing earbuds at the time, he was on the phone with somebody. This has been taken out of the report. He then goes on to say he only had one earbud in his ear. How he was making a call to a trainer on his way home from the airport in order to reschedule the training session for the morning. How he wanted to get shredded for an upcoming music video he was going to do. How he was supposed to have a training session for 8 p.m., but that had to be cancelled due to different flight delays between New York and Chicago. He then goes on to say that they were going to set up training schedule and food plan for him because he was going out of town. He related that he called the trainer something else, which probably is Bon here, because they had a long Nigerian name. He then goes on to say how he has a different cell number, but he has changed his phone number after the incident. But come on. If I were a police officer in that hospital room, that would be it. Who is his trainer? That long Nigerian, who are they? What the fuck is this man doing? Just post this traumatic attack, giving me these details. An earbud in my ear, I was supposed to be getting shredded. Like, you have just went through the most traumatic event of your life, where bleach was poured over you, where you had a rope around your neck. And this is the focus that you are giving in a police statement. Of course, immediately these police officers were suspicious. But at this point, looking at the bruises that Jussie would be posting and alleging to have in this hospital, the fractured rib, the rope burns around his neck, and the bruises on his face, the public still had no suspicions. And just like with everything in this story, if we are really picking up the patterns and trying to take this apart, here Jussie would refuse to give his cell phone records and also the medical records to the police, purely for privacy concerns. But the prosecution at trial would say that this had nothing to do with his privacy, that he didn't want the police to figure out he wasn't injured that night, and then also he didn't want them to figure out that he was communicating in the past couple of weeks at least with his supposed attackers. On the 30th of January, as Jussie is still inside of that hospital, there's an outpour of support from different celebrities. The Empire creator would be supporting him, telling Jussie to hold his head up, that he is with them. People would calling this act a despicable act that only shamefully reveals how deeply the diseases of hatred, inequality, racism, and discrimination continue to course through the country. And people will see this support as just coming to the aid of another brother that has tasted the brutality of hatred and racism and bigotry. On the 31st, Jussie is still refusing to hand his phone over. And here the police has heard in the statement that Jussie was on a phone call to somebody, and that in turn would confirm all of those slurs that have been uttered, right? So that is what they want. They want to pull that data and have that phone call on the record, because that would immediately mean that yes, this was a real attack. However, he's not giving him that. On the 1st of February, he would speak up for the first time after the attack, thanking people for the outpour of love and support. He would say, as my family stated, these types of cowardly attacks are happening to my sisters, brothers, and non-gender conforming siblings daily. I am not and should not be looked upon as an isolated incident. Most importantly, during times of trauma, grief, and pain, there is still a responsibility to lead with love. It's all I know, and that can't be kicked out of me. This is what I was referring to, speaking of the bigger picture. This was the true motivation. Not even the publicity stunt, but just driving this narrative, making these kind of statements at the current climate. Again, tell me if you see something else, but this is truly why I think he proceeded with it, even though there were so many times where he could have stopped. On this day, also, the Chicago Police Department would release pictures, so this will be like CCTV pictures of the two people that they named people of interest that they wanted to speak with. On the 2nd of February, he would actually perform at a concert that was planned for a long time, so he didn't cancel this, which you have to wonder what kind of injuries were inflicted on him that he didn't have to cancel this performance. He stated there that he is not fully healed yet, but he is going to be, like he's headed in that direction. He also said, above all, I fought back. I refer to the bigger picture here yet again because these are the statements that he is making in the days after his attack. And then he would conclude the statement by saying, I'm the gay Tupac, which nobody really knows what he was exactly referring to there. But in the upcoming days, the police is looking further and further into this. And on the 11th of February, he finally gives police a PDF file of his phone records, and they would say that those files were redacted, that some bits were definitely covered up. What Jussie didn't know, or expect, or planned well, let's be honest, is that Uber ride. The first leg of the journey that the brothers have taken, because the others, they would just hail a random cab on the street, right? Because they didn't have their phones on them to book that Uber. But their first ride would be an Uber ride. So the CCTV footage that the police had been expecting of the area, they really covered their grounds. They really did some justice when it comes to this case. I wish that Chicago PD considered every case like this and invested as much time as they did with Jussie, because they already, by the 2nd of February, had the CCTV footage of just random movements in the area, because it was a quiet street, you know, like there's not that many cars that will be circulating. And here is where they saw on that street up north from the crime scene an Uber driver dropping 2 individuals off. So they tracked that down. They rang the company, they tracked the driver down, and they interviewed him. This cab driver will tell the police about a skinny guy and a big guy that got into their car. He couldn't really see their faces because they were covered already at this point, and he relayed to the police where they initially wanted to be driven. Once the driver told them they're just parallel streets, then the skinny guy stated, okay, just take us to Illinois Street near there. This is where he would drop them off, and they apparently paid him for $9.75 ride with a $20 bill, and he remembered them because that was the highest tip that he had gotten in a while. This would be on the log there, and that's why we know that the brothers have been dropped off at 1:22 a.m. Here is where things start developing quickly. So the evening of January the 22nd, the brothers would take a flight to Nigeria from Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The next day, January the 30th, Jussie would call them, and they talked only for about 8 minutes. Sort of the nature of the call was to ensure that everything was okay. For the next 2 weeks, the police, the hate crime unit, would investigate this using surveillance videos, using police pod videos, in-car taxi cameras, ride-share records, credit card records, bank records, and the store receipt and the CCTV footage that would connect them back to the brothers. This means that by the time that the brothers would return to Chicago from Nigeria on February the 13th, the police would already know their details, they would know how they look like, and they highly suspected that the brothers were behind this attack. So at the airport, they were detained by US Customs and then they were brought in. Here, a search warrant would be issued and then executed, and this is why we have the records of the inventory that the police has found, including the stamps, including the red hats and the ski masks. The next day, the 14th of February, it is the day of love after all, it is Valentine's Day, so Jussie decides to message one of the brothers. He said, "Brother, I love you. I stand with you. I know 1000% you and your brother did nothing wrong and never would. I'm making this statement so everyone else knows. They will not get away with this. Please hit me when they let you go. I'm behind you fully." Now, this message, I'll put it up on the screen. There are some messages in between. I don't see the dates on them. I don't know if anybody has them. You know, I just wanted really to find the information on how they acted after the crime, like while the brothers were in Nigeria. Know about the training plan? Did they follow up on how many cardio workouts did Jussie have? I really just wanted to know that, so let me know if you find that. But this is Jussie supporting the brothers that he will later throw under the bus immediately as the opportunity shows itself. On the same day, as the brothers are being questioned by the police and Jussie is emotionally supporting them, he will also make an appearance. He will do an interview on the show Good Morning America. This has been described as the most embarrassing thing on the internet in the comments on the original video, sure to make you cringe. Just some descriptors for this interview, so just beware as you're watching this if I even manage to play it for copyright issues, if they don't take my ass down and just manage to shut down my channel. If not, I'll at least try to play the audio for you, because here is Jussie's version of events. I thought I should make it as unbiased as humanly possible and give Jussie's version of events as well. Here is him speaking with Robin Roberts, who was the host of the show, and also sees through his bullshit right away. Let's just be honest, Robin saw through it all. So he starts off by saying how he landed in Chicago, he went to his flat, realized there's no food, he needs protein, he needs eggs, he goes to Walgreens, but it's closed.
What happened that night, Jussie?
When I landed in Chicago, and Frank Gatson, who's like my uncle, and he's also my creative director, and he picked me up, and then we got back to the apartment. There was no food, and so I went out to Walgreens thinking that they were 24 hours and to have a smoke. Walgreens was closed, so I called him up and I said, hey, I'm going to run to Subway, which was across the street, and I'm going to get a salad. Do you want anything? I went to the Subway and got the order. During that time, I texted my manager thinking that he was still in Australia because he was on an Australian tour with one of his other clients. And I said, yo, call me when you can. He called me immediately.
And then we get to the core of it. He is crossing the street, he hears the empire slur, and the way he describes this is like, I don't respond to empire. My name is not Empire.
And while he was on the phone, I heard, as I was crossing the intersection, I heard Empire. And I don't answer to Empire. My name ain't Empire. And I didn't answer. I kept walking, and then I heard Empire. So I turned around and I said, did you just say to me? And I see the attacker.
He describes how they tussled by the stairs, how the second person was involved and he didn't really see them, but he felt like somebody else was kicking him in the back. And then they just stopped and ran off, and he saw where they ran, but it was too far. He didn't really manage to identify any of the attackers because of the ski masks that they were wearing.
Masked. And he said, this MAGA country punches me right in the face. So I punched his ass back. And then we started tussling. It was very icy. And we ended up tussling by the stairs. Fighting. There was a second person involved who was kicking me in my back. And then it just stopped. And they ran off. And I saw where they ran. And the phone was in my pocket, but it had fallen out. And it was sitting there. And my manager was still on the phone. So I picked up the phone and I said, Brandon. And he's like, what's going on? And I said, I was just jumped. And then I looked down and I see that there's a rope around my neck, which I hadn't.
You hadn't noticed it before?
No, because it was so fast. You know what I'm saying? It was so fast.
How long did this all
It felt like minutes, but it probably was like 30 seconds, honestly. I can't tell you honestly.
He technically didn't remove it because of the initial shock, because everything happened so fast.
Seconds, honestly. I can't tell you honestly. I noticed the rope around my neck and I started screaming. And I said, there's a rope around my neck.
Did you get any kind of description of the attack?
I gave a body description and because I saw this, right here or whatever, but I didn't see, I can't tell you what color their eyes were. I can't tell you. And I did not see anything except the second person I saw running away. And the first person, I saw his stature. I gave the description as best as I could. You have to understand also that it's Chicago in winter. People can wear ski masks and nobody's going to question that.
And when it comes to the reports he made to the police, he said he gave body description, he only saw the eyes area but didn't see much. It's Chicago in winter, no one is going to question why people are wearing ski masks. He also said when he saw that picture, the blurry CCTV footage of like two figures on the street, he believed that it was them. He had no doubt in his mind, seeing that blurry CCTV footage, it was them.
The police have gone through a lot of video and they were able to capture an image of two people of interest. Have you seen that image? Mm-hmm. And do you believe that they could possibly be the attackers?
I do.
What is it about their size, or why do you feel that they could possibly be?
Because I was there. For me, when that was released, I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. I don't have any doubt in my mind that that's them. Never did.
When Robin asks him why did he hesitate to call the police, he said that there was level of pride there. As a gay man, you are considered to be weak. And then when it comes to the privacy and why he didn't give his phone details, he said, well, look what has happened. And then he tries to tear up without any real tears appearing on his face.
There's a level of pride there. We live in a society where, as a gay man, you are considered somehow to be weak. And I'm not weak. I am not weak. And we, as a people, are not weak. So, I can accept that there was pride there. There's also privacy. At the end of the day, look what has happened. Look what has happened. So, I'm glad that Frank called the police. I'm glad that we reported it. During that time before they came, it took them about maybe half hour to come.
He also says that he saw the bruise on his face, the rope burn around his neck, and he smelled bleach. He describes the whole bleach incident as like having a bad bleach job.
And during that time, I was looking at myself, just like checking myself out. I saw the bruise on my neck, like the little, the rope burn around my neck. And then I smelled bleach. I know the smell of bleach. And I saw on my sweatshirt, it had marks on it, like spots on it, when you have a bad bleach job. So then I was like, there's bleach on me too. So when the police came, I kept the clothes on. I kept the rope.
Robin, of course, questions him the most about the rope and why did he have it, why do we see it on you in this police footage? And she asks him, so you had rope around you all this time? To which Jussie yet again says that yes, he had the rope because he wanted them to see.
So you had the rope on the entire time?
It wasn't like wrapped around, but yeah, it was around because I wanted them to see. I wanted them to see what this was. I told them what happened, everything. I also asked them to turn their body cams off because they were trying to stay in the hallway. And I was like, please just come in. Like, I don't want a big scene with my neighbors and with like the second round of police officers. I went down to where it happened, and I walked them through exactly what happened.
He also describes how he walked the police to the exact spot of the attack and even pointed to the camera and was like, oh my god, this is great because there is a camera there that must have caught this whole attack. You must have it on tape. However, the camera was facing north and that's why we don't have the footage.
And I looked up and I saw that there was a camera directly on the light post that is in the intersection. So I'm like, there it is.
A potential break in the case that would eventually fall apart days later.
And then the detective told me that the camera inside of the casing was facing north, so they didn't have it.
When asked to address all of the comments that he has been getting where people are skeptical about him going to Subway, about the camera not recording the attack, he gets kind of feisty, he gets kind of angry, saying, well, Subway is open 24 hours, people are killing me with those comments, the camera facing north, like how is this my issue? He talks in this 15-minute interview, at least 3 minutes are him talking about Subway, eggs, food.
Subway is open 24 hours. Like, people kill me when they say things like that, because it's like Subway is open 24 hours for a reason. So that when you're hungry at night and you ain't got no food, you go to Subway. The camera facing north, how is that my issue? It feels like if I had said it was a Muslim or Mexican or someone black, I feel like the doubters would have supported me a lot more. And that says a lot about the place that we are in our country right now. The fact that we have these fear mongers, these people that are trying to separate us.
And he also addresses the rumor. There were a couple of leaks here, a lot of them from the hospital itself. There was so much staff that was actually fired from that hospital because they all looked up Jussie's records and, you know, just how serious those bruises were. But among those rumors was also that he said that the attackers were wearing MAGA hats. And here he rebuffed that. He said that he never needed to add anything to it, that the crime was already horrific on its own.
Ones that you have heard that were inaccurate?
That I had said that they were wearing MAGA hats. I never said that. I didn't need to add anything like that. They called me a. They called me a. There's no which way you cut it. I don't need some MAGA hat as the cherry on top of some racist sundae.
Robin also touches upon like what kind of misinformation he had heard apart from the hats as well, and he says he heard it was a date gone bad. And then he goes on again to give too much information, saying he's not gonna go eat tuna sandwich on a date, referring again to Subway. You know, there's Grindr, there's all of these apps. I could have invited them to my flat. Like, you know, I don't use Grindr, haven't been on it for years. But I'll admit, I've been on it back in the day. And you're like, the question was, what other claims did you hear that were false? You're talking about Subway, yet again, for the next minute.
Which I so resent, that narrative. I'm not gonna go out and get a tuna sandwich and a salad to meet somebody. That's ridiculous. And it's offensive. Yes, there's Grindr. Yes, there's Jacked. Yes, there's all of these things, which I have not been on in years. I can admit that I was on that back in the day. I was single. You know what I'm saying? But I have not been on that in years. But aside from that, it's offensive. And I absolutely resent that narrative.
When Robin asks him about what could have possibly motivated this attack, this is when he said that he might have been too outspoken. He comes hard against the Trump administration, and that is what he thinks motivated it.
Why do you think you were targeted?
I can just assume, I come really, really hard against 45. I come really, really hard against his administration. And I don't hold my tongue.
Again, you kind of have to question the priorities. And the interview ends with the message that he wants to send to the public, where he wants a little gay boy seeing this to know that he fought back, to learn how to fight, to be a fighter, that he's not advocating violence, but still, like, fight until you die.
I want that video found so badly because for probably 4 reasons. Number 1, I want them to find the people that did it. Number 2, I want them to stop being able to say alleged attack. Number 3, I want them to see that I fought back. And I want a little gay boy who might watch this to see that I fought back. And it does not take anything away from people that are not able to do that. But I fought back. They ran off. I didn't.
What do you say to a young gay man, a young gay person?
To learn to fight. And I don't just mean like learn to fight. I mean, learn to fight. Learn to be a fighter. I am not advocating violence at all. So let's be clear about that. If you're going to die, fight until you do. Because if you don't fight, you have no chance. I have fought for love. I'm an advocate. I respect too much the people who I am now one of those people who have been attacked in any way. You do such a disservice when you lie about things like this.
And you again have to think like, why is none of the words, none of the phrases that this man is mentioning is about like, let's get them. Let's get the people who are behind this, so this doesn't happen to anybody else. Like the narrative is like 3 minutes talking about Subway, about eggs, about the food that he is eating, and then the rest again, just like some agenda that he had conjured up. It just doesn't make sense for somebody who had gone through a supposed traumatic attack to be acting as. You would want the perpetrators caught, unless you are behind the crime yourself. After this interview, on 17th of February, Chicago police will say that they have had some developments in the investigation, and this will be a day after they actually release the brothers without charges. They say in the public statement that they want to speak to the individual who reported the incident, Jussie Smollett, saying that he is angered and devastated by recent reports that the perpetrators are individuals he is familiar with. This would lead to Jussie being officially charged on the 20th of February, so less than a month after this attack. He would be charged here with disorderly conduct and filing a false police report. And this would be the moment when the CCTV surveillance from that shop showing the brothers buying the supplies would be made public. And as you can imagine, this immediately means that the public opinion on the attack has shifted. The shift happened for all of those following TMZ articles on this case, with 50 Cent, who previously came out in support of Jussie Smollett like so many other people have, posting a picture on Instagram referencing that gay Tupac moment. He put Jussie's face over Tupac's on his album cover for All Eyes on Me and changed the album name to All Lies on Me. On 21st of February, Jussie Smollett decides to hand himself over to the police and is arrested for this attack. During the press conference that would come after this, the possible motivation will surface, where the police superintendent would say that Jussie took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career, adding that he did this because he was dissatisfied with his salary. He would conclude that by saying, Smollett dragged city's reputation through mud. In turn, the Fox Studios would release the statement saying that they are investigating this, that they understand the seriousness of the matter, they're evaluating their options. And of course, Trump tweeted, "What about MAGA and the tens of millions of people you insulted with your racist and dangerous comments?" And this is just among so many reasons of why this didn't have to happen. This wasn't thought through. This isn't the way forward. Because now you have done everything in your power to make a statement, to stage a hate crime, and to prove that racial slurs have been used, that, MAGA country has been used, that you are attacking the administration, and now, in turn, it backfired. The administration has the upper hand, and you look like a mug. That's what pains me so much, because I understand trying to make a statement, trying to do it, the activism, fight for it, represent like your race, your color, like your sexuality, and this is not the way. He just proved that this is not the way to do it. On 22nd of February, Jussie would be suspended from Empire, and then a few days later, on the 25th, that check would start being called into question. The brothers, by this point, were known to the public and the media, and with this check, they would be completely exposed. So on the 1st of March, they would release a statement saying that they regret getting involved. They would state that they understand how this has impacted people across the nation, particularly minority communities, and especially those who have been victims of hate crimes themselves. On 13th of March, Empire returns and Jamal is featured in it, but of course he's not returning for the remainder of the season. And then on 14th of March, he pleads not guilty. He appears in court and he is by this point charged with 16 counts of disorderly conduct and pleads not guilty. Jussie was due back in court in mid-April. However, on 26th of March, he was cleared of all charges. So there was an emergency court appearance, and here it was decided that all charges against Jussie would be dropped. His legal team released a statement, and his record has been wiped clean. Now, the Chicago police and the city's mayor criticized this decision, saying at the end of the day, it is Mr. Smollett who committed this hoax, period. The mayor said that Jussie was let off scot-free with no sense of accountability for the moral and ethical wrong of his actions. In these early reports, the prosecutor on the case, this guy called Joey Maggots, who decided to drop the charges, would tell in the statement that the charges were dropped because Jussie would forfeit a $10,000 bond payment and he agreed to carry out community service. And Jussie's lawyers would confirm that the case is closed and that no public official has the right to violate their client's rights. The case was dismissed and Jussie should be allowed to move on with his life as a free citizen, meaning as if nothing had happened. So let us back up, because this was quick, wasn't it? It's just the attack happened and then less than 2 months later, he's walking free, as if nothing had happened, as if all of the evidence that the police has gathered, all of the hours that they have invested, just didn't yield anything. So let us talk about why the charges were dropped. Did the authorities have enough evidence in the first place? The public originally thought that the charges might have been dismissed because there was no original footage of the attack. You know, they had a CCTV of the brothers buying the supplies, then the supplies would be found at their home, you know, they could connect them to the attack with the Uber ride, etc. But then, because the burden of proof is usually with the prosecution, so they have to prove that the crime had happened in trial, if they had seen any holes in this case, like there's no video of the crime, they couldn't even connect the letter to the brothers, why would they bring it to trial? That as a whole doesn't explain why the charges were dismissed, though. The easiest way to explain this is through alternative to prosecution. So this is an umbrella term that prosecutors use either to describe deferred prosecution or pre-trial diversion, or both in this case, because both will lead to the dismissal of the charges. So deferred prosecution is similar to non-prosecution agreement, and it is a voluntary alternative to adjudication in which a prosecutor agrees to grant amnesty in exchange for the defendant agreeing to fulfill certain requirements. This in simple terms means if there is an alternative to prosecution, let's say you are a first-time offender, the offenses are, in this case I think it was class 4 felony, so that's, you know, one of the least serious felonies, then the prosecution, upon their own discretion, can take this route. And alternatives to prosecution, the state attorney Kim Foxx, who still is the state attorney for the Cook County in Illinois, would say are not a new or unusual practice. In the past few years before Jussie's alleged attack, her attorneys have referred more than 5,700 cases for alternative prosecution. So they would compare Jussie to those cases, and they said that based off of that, and this being his first criminal offense, his first charge, they decided for an alternative. He's going to forfeit the $10,000 bond, and he can just complete his community service. We know that this isn't Jussie's first criminal charge, but also his lawyer here would say that he was considered under the same criteria as these almost 6,000 cases, right? So that the office didn't treat this case differently from any other. So the lead prosecutor on this case would review the case's facts and considered that volunteer service in the community that Jussie has already been doing, as well as his willingness to forfeit his $10,000 bond, and the fact that he had no prior felonies and wasn't a danger to community makes him a perfect candidate to be released and for the case not to go to trial. But now the city of Chicago took this as a slap on the face. I think they first took it as a slap on the face just because of how speedily it had happened, but also because they didn't believe that $10,000 was enough. That's not even nearly what the city has spent. They have stated at least that they have spent $50,000 by this point only, so for only the few months. However, now they would put a special prosecutor on this case to investigate the previous one. So a judge that is now retired petitioned to have the special prosecutor appointed to investigate this case. And this person, called Dan Webb, that we will learn about in the trial a bit later, was put on this 6 months after Jussie was released without charges. To summarize the 60-page report that I will put in the description box if you want to read up on it, this investigation wouldn't yield enough to support any criminal charges against the previous prosecutor in this case, Kim Foxx. So she is still in Cook County, she's still in the same office. However, it did identify substantial abuses of discretion and failures in the office prosecution and then resolution of this case. What was called into question, as you could have already guessed, one of it was that Jussie never had criminal record before. Then they downplayed the charges, the money that he was to pay by the judgment of the professionals. This should have at least been $50,000, not just the $10K bond that he had. Kim Foxx, the prosecutor of the first case, also stayed in touch with the family. She was recused from this case and her office was investigating it, but despite of that, she had stayed in touch. She would have had a text with Jussie's sister Journey exposed in this report, and she also even stayed in touch with Michelle Obama's chief of staff, Tina Shen. And everybody seemed to be working together in order to get Jussie to have his record wiped clean. Why, at least from what I've read, she hasn't gotten any criminal charges is because she was not involved with the initial disposition, with the initial investigation on the case, and then later she was recused, so she could technically say that she wasn't knowing the ins and outs of it. So as this investigation is happening, before they expose all of that and before the charges are filed again, well, Jussie in March is ordered to pay for police's overtime. They have ordered him to pay about $130,000 to cover the cost of police officers, including overtime that was worked on this case. From what I gathered to this day in 2022, I don't think this had been paid yet. And I kind of think that there might be a reason behind it, because by paying it, it's technically admission of guilt. Which also brings me to the next bit that happened on 23rd of April. That is that the brothers, the Assundairo brothers, sued actor and his lawyers for defamation. I didn't see the digits on this one. I could not find it online. I don't know if this lawsuit is still ongoing. And also, again, if he was to ever pay the brothers, that would be a definite admission of guilt. So I doubt that the brothers would see any money from Jussie. In June of 2019, it is officially declared that Jussie will not be returning to Empire. And then later that same month, on the 24th, that footage, the body cam footage by the police, where Jussie is in his flat with a noose still around his neck, was released to the public. Honestly, whoever was doing the PR team for the police was just spot on. They just would not let him rest in peace here. During this period, the police would also release that video from the cab showing the brothers on the night of when the police was called. But it won't be until February 2020 when the special prosecutor Dan Webb, who was the one who was assigned to investigate the initial prosecution team, would release a statement saying that they are going to further prosecute Jussie. Dan Webb would indict Jussie on 6 charges this time, so they dropped it from 16 to 6. And all of these counts are surrounding him talking to different police officers and also claiming that a different kind of crime had happened. I mean, like, you know, rope around his neck, aggravated battery, pouring bleach on him. That is what I mean by different crime. I'll put them on the screen so you can see what the counts were. What this meant was that the trial was definitely to happen once both the prosecution and the defense were to have their case. And you know how people have predictions when it comes to these trials? I mean, we've really seen it with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. People have suspected here that Jussie could face up to 3 years in prison on each count, according to Illinois law. Still though, because of his lack of criminal history, only having that one DUI charge on his record, the fact that nobody was actually seriously injured, it seemed unlikely that he is going to see a day in prison. People still expected, based off of these counts being for Class 4 felonies, for Jussie to receive something like probation and community service. However, here, if you are like me, my first thought was, wait, double jeopardy, like that's a thing in the US. He already was charged. What the hell happened there? Like, how could they bring this to trial again? And well, this is why this first prosecution and what they have done in terms of like deferred prosecution and, you know, their whole discretion of how they let Jussie go free actually backfired. So the legal principle, let me tell you, of double jeopardy protects defendants from being tried twice for the same crime. But in general, it only kicks in when somebody begins a trial or pleads guilty, according to legal experts. Here, none of those things have happened. Because of that, we speed up all the way to the end of November 2021, last year, when jury selection was in motion. The trial will happen between 29th of November 2021 and 9th of December, when the verdict would be declared. And here I won't be going into as much detail, mostly because I have mentioned it throughout the story, but also because, you know how I would put screenshots of like court documents, etc. that I found. Well, most of it was based off his initial charges. This happened only about a month and a half ago, so I couldn't find like any actual official records. So let me tell you how the trial went according to the news resources. During the trial, as we know, the prosecution will drive the theory that the brothers were hired by Jussie in order to conduct this attack for him to promote his career because he was dissatisfied with his salary. The special prosecutor Dan Webb, the same guy that investigated the first one, would argue that Jussie developed a secret plan that would make it appear there was actually a hate crime that occurred against him by supporters of Donald Trump. They had all of the evidence to paint the picture, the CCTV footage of the brothers buying the supplies, the trip to the bank to deposit the check that Jussie had given them, the copy of the check as well, and then of course the rest of CCTV footage, the body cam that they have also showed that has heavily influenced the jurors. Most of the witnesses for the prosecution would be the police officers that took his statements. So 5 police investigators would testify that Jussie told them 2 men attacked him in the street, that they yelled racist, anti-gay and pro-Trump remarks, that they put a noose around his neck and poured bleach on him. Because Dan Webb knew the defense's strategy would be to criminalize the brothers, he tried to portray them in a better light, saying yes, they have criminal charges, and unlike, Jussie Smollett, they never actually hid them, because his were kind of hidden for him to get that deferred prosecution thing, while the brothers just confessed. They actually cooperated with the police, and they shouldn't be, as such, put back into the system. The prosecution would say that the brothers turned their life around, that they earned several college degrees, and that before this attack, before Jussie got them in on it, before the defamation of their character, they were actually doing well for themselves. Yeah, their bankruptcy was shown in court, their criminal record as well, but they have been getting different roles. They could have done it without Jussie. Our system would be a lot better if the young brothers who get in trouble turn around and get 3 degrees instead of going back into the system. They also would cross-examine and contradict defense on the sexuality, saying we don't weaponize sexuality here, that Bon was heterosexual, but even if he wasn't, he should be a proud black gay, just like Jussie Smollett was. And this is where we have those statements that I have read out before about Ola actually not being homophobic or creepy whatsoever, that is just the narrative that Jussie wanted to drive. The defense, on the other hand, would drive the narrative that the brothers were highly intelligent criminals. Jussie's defense lawyer would argue that there was no physical or forensic evidence linking Jussie to a hoax, countering the prosecution's argument that Jussie staged the attack because he was upset about his salary situation on Empire. The defense team would introduce the pattern of the brothers, yes, going into Jussie's car, but only for the purposes of just smoking weed, so that Jussie isn't just hassled on the street by his fans. Uchenenye, who was the defense lawyer for Jussie, said that much of the prosecution's case relied on the testimony of the brothers, who were depicted as sneaky masterminds out for some quick cash. He said you have to have your guard up with them mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. They're highly intelligent, really smart, and they know how to dumb it down so you think they're victims. The goal for the defense team, apart from dehumanizing the brothers, was also to humanize Jussie. So they called 3 witnesses, including Jussie's former music manager and publicist. The goal was to make sure that this isn't done for a publicity stunt. So the Empire executive producer testified that the show did indeed receive that letter, but it was the reaction by Jussie that should have made the impression on jury. He said that Jussie didn't even want the letter publicized. He wanted to keep it on the low. He didn't want any sort of public attention about it. The defense lawyer would say Jussie was not a person who liked attention. Even the publicist was frustrated at him for that. It's a fantasy. Jussie would also testify faced with the text messages, especially the on the low message, stating that he was simply trying to get the herbal steroid that encourages weight loss and that the brothers were going to Nigeria. That is also supported by the flight records, and that is what that message meant, that everything else fits into his narrative. There was a diet plan, there was a program that he was following. And on the motive, so remember the prosecution said that Jussie was dissatisfied with the salary, he was dissatisfied with how the producers treated that whole letter, that threat that he had received. Well, the defense team actually said that if anything, Jussie had an anti-motive for the attack. The defense lawyers said that Jussie was actually supposed to shoot a historic episode on the TV show that featured a black gay marriage, and also that music video the week of the attack. He couldn't afford to have anything happen to his face. However, according to the defense attorneys, who had the motive? The brothers, again. They were motivated to accuse Jussie of staging the hoax because they didn't like him and they saw the opportunity to make the money out of it. Here is where, even without any records, without receipts, without proof, I think the defense attorney just wanted to plant the seed of doubt in the jurors' heads, because they suggested that after the brothers were questioned by the police about the alleged attack, they asked Jussie for $1 million each in order for them not to testify against him. They would also argue that the Chicago police rushed to judgment here when they brought the charges against Jussie and suggested that there might have even been a third person that was involved in the attack. They didn't really have anything to prove this except from Jussie's own words. So on the $1 million each, Jussie would say that brothers didn't contact him directly, but rather with their requests they went through Jussie's representative. And then on the third man, the defense attorney would raise the possibility that there were additional people involved in the attack because there were some witnesses that saw a suspicious white man with a rope about an hour before the attack. He also said that there was a security guard in Streeterville that told the police that he saw a pale-skinned man running away as Jussie picked himself up off of the street. The defense attorney would also say that the cab driver that picked them up before the attack even said that he heard one of the brothers talking to someone, not in the car. So basically stating that the evidence that, Jussie told them leave the phones at home just wasn't correct. They weren't following the orders, rather they had another accomplice. Not only did they not have any receipts, any documents, any screenshots to support this, but also the Uber driver testified. And he said that he never saw the brothers actually have a cell phone on them. He said that the first guy to get in was talking, but it was unclear who he was talking to. If he was on the phone, was he talking to himself? The Uber driver said, "I believed he had a phone because the guy would have to be crazy to talk to himself." And he then stated that the guys might have changed their destination on the phone app. So remember how they at first said they're going to one street and then they said it's fine, just go to the one that's parallel to it. But you don't have to prove it, you just have to give reasonable doubt to the jurors, and that is what Uche and the defense attorneys here believed that they had done. In their closing statements, the defense team focused on the raid of the brothers' flat, stating that during the raid, guns and drugs were found, despite Ola having a felony record. He also stated everything that was found in the inventory, proving that the brothers were behind the attack. They would tell the jury that the case that the prosecution had built was built like a house of cards. We all know what happens to a house of cards when you apply a little pressure. Not only does Jussie have a lack of motive, he has anti-motive. It's like anti-matter. Meanwhile, during the start of closing arguments, the prosecution team explained that the state had to prove the case of Jussie Smollett, that the burden of proof is with them. Mr. Smollett developed a plan to carry out fake hate crime, and he did. I have to prove he falsely reported fake hate crime as a real hate crime. What the court correspondents would say struck the nerve with the jury was when the prosecutor said, "Mr. Smollett went on that witness stand, took an oath to tell the truth, and made many, many false statements to you. He lied to you as jurors." He then went on to point out the times that Jussie had lied on the stand, saying, "He told you all that he didn't know who attacked him. That's what he said. That was false testimony." He also said that Jussie tailored his testimony to fit what he could not deny, like surveillance footage. He knew there was a substantial amount of evidence that he did exactly what the brothers said they did. And he questioned how Jussie expected jurors to believe that the brothers would know exactly where Jussie was, exactly where he would be after his flight, where he would be leaving his home on a cold morning in January in Chicago. How would the brothers ever know where Smollett was going to be right at 2 a.m.? That doesn't make any sense. That is something that is really brushed past in this case, was that it seemed like the attack happened on the dot. The brothers were seen running a minute or a few minutes after the attack, right after 2 a.m. It just seemed to have happened suspiciously on the dot of the hour. Mr. Smollett didn't want the crime solved, Mr. Webb would say during the closing arguments. He wanted to report it as a hate crime, he wanted media exposure, but he didn't want the brothers apprehended. The prosecution was the one to end the closing arguments after Dan Webb spoke for about an hour and 45 minutes. He concluded by saying that Jussie knew the attack was fake and reported it as a real crime. "We have proven our case beyond a reasonable doubt." He reminded them of the 6 charges against Jussie, and the jury went into deliberation. And the jury of 6 men and 6 women would reach their decision after only about 10 hours of deliberations on December the 9th. They would find Jussie Smollett guilty of 5 out of 6 counts. The only charge he would not be found guilty of would be telling the second detective that he was aggravated battery victim. At that point in the timeline, the sentencing date was yet to be scheduled, and Jussie would be facing up to 3 years in prison. That was sort of the prognosis at the time. What this meant is that the defense team is going to see this as not making sense, because how can you be found guilty on 5 charges about falsely claiming that a hate crime had happened and not on the 6th one? They would say that this kind of contradicts itself, and of course this is going to give them some sort of form to appeal. The defense attorney would say the verdict is inconsistent. You can't say Jussie is lying and Jussie is not lying for the same exact incident. But the prosecutor here would say, since the 5 other counts were related to the reports that were made in the immediate hours after the attack and not 2 weeks later, he pointed out that the dates could have potentially played a part in the acquittal on that one last charge. So of course I looked into it, and that's why I kept it for the end. So what happened during the trial is, as I mentioned, all of these detectives would be called onto the witness stand. And one of them, the 5th witness, was the detective called Robert Graves. He would tell the jurors about the 2 interviews that he had with Jussie, so one at the hospital and later in the unmarked police car. And that second interview happened on February the 14th, when the brothers were in custody. Graves, from all of the accounts, actually was supposed to be off that day. He had worked overtime the whole week, and also they called him because he already interviewed Jussie before, so they thought he would be comfortable with him. That testimony, though, on the 14th of February wouldn't be on the record, like there would not be a recording of it, so of course his defense team really poked holes in it. So, for example, Graves would testify that Jussie said that the attackers acted white, but that he wrote that Jussie said that he now believes that the attacker was white due to the comments made. And he had also gotten Graves to confirm that this was his overtime after already having worked over 45 hours, so that this might have caused the slips in the reports. So of course, as a juror, you're listening to this, and during cross-examination, if somebody kind of crumbles when the holes are poked, or you see that maybe there is a chance there for reasonable doubt, you kind of have to acquit, I guess. I'm just pissed off because it doesn't make sense on the surface that they have found him guilty on all of the other charges, because it is the same attack, so I get both points of view, I guess. It just gives him grounds for appeal, and that's the part that I hate. In terms of where this case stands now, I waited before making this video because there was a status hearing on 27th of January, so just a couple of days before you are getting this one out. And here Jussie appeared in court virtually, so on Zoom, and during this call the judge gave the defense until February the 25th to file any post-trial motions. And then on March the 3rd, both sides are going to turn in the list of witnesses that they want to call for the sentencing date. This sentencing is scheduled for March the 10th. This hasn't changed since. It hasn't changed during the status hearing. And here, Jussie is to be convicted of 5 out of the 6 counts. The expectations here, according to the legal records, is the max of 3 years from everything I've seen, because class 4 felonies carry penalties of 1 to 3 years in prison, but also probation or conditional discharge, which is similar to probation but with less strict conditions. From my records, he is also still to pay the $130,000 to the city of Chicago for the hours that they have put in investigating this case, and the brothers still have this lawsuit. I haven't seen any conclusion on that, and I haven't seen any numbers, like what kind of amount are they asking from him. But do you think that he would pay any of these to the city of Chicago? I think he will eventually be obligated to pay that. I don't know how life works in that regard, but to the brothers, I genuinely don't see it happening, because that would be really hard admission of guilt if he was actually paying them up. But that is the story on the case of Jussie Smollett. Just some final points here. and some questions that I'm passing on to you. What are your thoughts on this case? What do you think this means for his career, his legacy? I believe he's only 39 right now. Yeah, until June, I think, which is when he turns 40. You know, can he recover from it? Should he be allowed to? How long would he be cancelled for? Or maybe you actually completely disagree with me and I haven't managed to prove that this was a hoax, in which case please paint the story for me. Because as you know, I'm quite outspoken, especially in the conclusions part of the cases, where I think there are gaps in the story, where I don't see it flowing. Here, literally, it was painted, like Bob Ross fucking nailed this freaking painting for us. It was literally portrayed through maps, through CCTV footage, through everything. Why were these brothers there, if not for the specific reason or having had arranged this with Jussie prior to it? It doesn't make any logical sense. Sometimes, you know, I would be looking at those text messages and being like, just please tell me that this is actually the truth, because otherwise it is too insane. It is just too crazy that something like this came out of somebody's mind and they actually had all of this time, all of these points to stop themselves, and they just didn't. To answer my own question before I lose my voice completely, do I think that he should be, like, I don't know, cancelled forever? I don't know, but I think there should be some freaking consequences. If he gets away again and just gets probation, like, what is he going to learn out of it? What is he going to gain out of it? I also wondered throughout this research, because I researched on his background, like, you know, does his family still buy it 100%? What are the thoughts of all of the siblings that he is really close to? Because out of all of the interviews, they stand by him. And you kind of have to wonder, like, you know, after seeing everything, like, do you though? Or do you just, you know, have to say it? But yeah, to go back to that same question, like, I'm following this weird saga on TikTok. Well, not really following it, because I can't even tell you the names of the people. But it's just two influencers that have been a couple for a while, and then the girl is accused of SA, the sexual assault of the guy, and you know, he came publicly out about it, and still she has maybe lost a couple of 100,000 followers. She still has about like 14 million people following her, and that kind of strikes me as maybe a possible plotline, a possible future for this story, because people still want to know the drama. People still want to be in the know. Still want to know, is he going to publish a book? Is he going to act anywhere else? What is going to happen in this story? And that, unfortunately, in so many cases makes the people that are behind these crimes, these fake reports, etc., benefit out of it. We're seeing it with Jamie Lynn Spears, who I've been tweeting and rage tweeting about, making profit out of her book. For what? For what? This isn't about Brittany Maya. Shut it. Going back to the conclusions and to the seriousness of this topic, what about the brothers? Do you see them as victims? What level of guilt should they have? I just found it extremely bizarre that they just got off completely scot-free when they technically were behind the attack in some form. I guess it is because of the cooperation with the police, but like, will anybody learn anything out of this? And what does it mean for the future of hate crime, for how hate crime is reported? Because I have said throughout this video many times that neither Jussie nor the brothers, I personally, cannot see any of those two parties as victims. Who I see as victims in this case, and why I have given a trigger warning, is all of the victims of real hate crimes, of real acid attack crimes with chemical substances. Because those are the people that hear this story, that see it on the news, and are seeing all of these resources used on Jussie while real hate crimes have probably been reported throughout those months. And they just haven't been investigated because they have investigated Jussie's story. And that I don't think resonated in any of their brains ever. Because had it resonated, you would have probably figured out maybe, you know, if people are trying to resolve my fake crime because I am a celebrity at the expense of the actual crimes that are happening, maybe that would have been the one thing where they would have backed out of this. They would have realized how ridiculous this is and how many resources, police hours, the money that was spent for what? Resolving a hoax. That is what makes my blood boil, because of what it means for people who are actual victims reporting this type of crime and just not being believed on the basis of something like that. But now, because I'm choosing cases that anger me recently, I'm gonna go and try to relax, calm down a little bit, figure out my anger management issues, and then start editing this beauty, because you have seen the weather change, you have seen day turn to night. Poetic for the end of this. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this type of videos. You are so lame. You just don't know how to sell yourself. You literally just don't. And follow me on the social media as well, because as I mentioned, I have changed my job situation now, so the videos are kind of going to be getting delayed all over the place, and I will be updating you there, especially Twitter. Twitter is my bitch. Twitter is my bitch. Good. You okay? The girl in the back has been triggered. The girl in the back is like, you need a break. What have I tweeted recently? Probably about my meltdowns. Lack of friends, social life, you know, all the fun topics. Yeah, definitely. It will cheer you up. Most definitely. Find me on Twitter. It will make your day. You won't. You won't. I lie. Okay, that's enough. That's fucking enough. Goodbye, guys. Lost the plot. Completely lost it. Lost the plot. You're going back out of fame. I'm not gone yet. Wow, this is blurry. Was this whole video blurry? Oh, Maya, god damn it.